Okay, I am going to start out by apologizing for not adding any photos, tangible proof, or deep history lessons here. I would appreciate if you could all not accuse me of lying or being mentally ill. This is 100% true. You must take me at my word because this is still an ongoing experience in me, and I'm physically affected every day by ongoing nausea, especially when I look at the photos or talk about the history of this haunted place. I'm trying my best to avoid making matters worse. I feel grueling resistance as I am typing this, and am fighting the nausea right at this moment, so I hope you can understand. Last Sunday was Father's Day. I was with my boyfriend, my mom, and my dad, sitting at the dinner table eating when the topic of ghost hunting came up. My boyfriend, let's call him B, and I love this type of thing. Neither of us are particularly religious. We are a couple of open-minded, curious agnostics. So the idea that spirits could exist and possibly show themselves to us excites us very much. We had heard about this Goatman Bridge, officially known as Old Alton Bridge, from a couple sources: friends, Ghost Adventures TV show, and other articles online. We also live relatively close to the location. Please look up the history yourself. Just Google Goatman's Bridge, Denton history. I'll tell you, has very gruesome violence. Every time I read about it now, I feel like I'm going to puke. So anyways, we decided to go. My dad has never encountered a spirit before, and this place seemed to be a very popular spot for ghost hunting. We went at about 10 p.m., a prime time to explore the bridge and hike the trails with little interruption. The bridge at first was empty and seemed a bit spooky, but we didn't see anything out of the ordinary there. We then hiked a couple different trails nearby. The first one was completely fine, no activity. The second trail, we saw a pair of glowing eyes in the distance when I shone my flashlight in that direction. We all think it was a deer though. Third trail. We came up to this very scary looking, graffiti covered structure. It had words like, "We all die." It had 2 pentagrams within the letters of that. There were stars across the top of it with fake blood dripping from every other one, and it also had a number of symbols and words that none of us or Google Lens could decipher. Although we all did see my nickname, Jen, written slightly hidden within another acronym. I forgot what it was, but I'm not going to look at the pictures right now, sorry. Later, B had dug some more online and found out the structure is actually an altar that had been used for animal sacrifices. All in all, the most exciting part about going to the place itself was me tripping over a root and bruising both of my knees. The only paranormal activity that the 3 of us had witnessed was my dad expressing he felt an unexplainable quick tap on his back a few yards from the altar. So we go back to the bridge, and to our surprise, about 4 or 5 men, white, early 20s, were sitting on the spider-infested bridge, smoking cigarettes and remaining unusually silent. I honestly don't know why anyone wouldn't hang out there at midnight and not have flashlights or anything, but hey, maybe they're just kind of weird. Who knows? I didn't have a very good feeling about them, though. As soon as I got in the car, I felt like I was going to puke. I was not sick with any illness. I'm not sick now either. At first I believed it was and is a visceral reaction to the haunted place. Now, I know it was and is something more. When we got home, I was in immense pain, unspeakable, excruciating nausea. I went to go wash my hands in the bathroom. When I looked at my reflection, I didn't recognize myself. I was looking into someone else's eyes. I met the gaze of someone violent, someone with immense hate. It was not my reflection. Rather, someone, or something, was using my body to see through me. I know it sounds crazy, but it just gets crazier. I apologize on some of these upcoming details. I was not in control of my body or mind at this time. My memory of this part is almost dreamlike. B could see that something in me had changed. He told me to lie down because the nausea was making me lightheaded and very dizzy. I remember B asking me a series of questions. I don't remember most, but I do remember saying that I am not Jen. I remember how hate-filled gaze resting on B's eyes. I remember my dog not coming over to me like she usually does. I remember telling B that I was unsure of whether he should stay or not because I was afraid I would hurt him. Physically, I felt extremely violent, to the point that I was digging my nails into my hands as hard as I could, but could feel no pain. I remember wanting to break his hand when I was holding it. I remember fixating on a wall filled with very old photos of my ancestors and having a feeling that whatever is in me is trying to learn how to become me. I still think that last feeling I mentioned is lingering in me even today. The next day I woke up and couldn't shake the thought that I had this new body. I tried doing things I don't normally do. I was testing my pleasures, my body, its limits. I think whatever took over my body is mostly gone. It is a possibility that I may be in fact haunting my own psyche, since that night is a reaction to try and cope. But both B and I know that something took hold of me that night, and I'm paying for that every day now. By the way, I took pictures with my DSLR, some with flash and some without. In almost every photo, if you zoomed all the way in, you could see at least one red, strange-looking pixel lurking in different parts of the photo. I have absolutely no clue if this is camera-related issue or not, but I become more physically ill the longer I look at them. Does anyone know if this is normal for taking raw night photos on a Canon Rebel T3i? The red dots showed up in both images with flash and without flash, so totally dark. So as you know, B did more digging on Google after this whole thing, and he actually found out that women typically have stronger paranormal experiences or reactions at Goatman's Bridge, and could be related to this evil spirit named Steve. I do not wish to say any more about that, so please feel free to look it up. If anyone has a good cure for nausea besides Pepto or weed, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, cures for getting rid of these lingering psychological effects that resulted from that night would be nice too. Open to any discussions or questions and recommendations. Thanks. My friends and I were out camping in Maryland, near a river. We set up a whole weekend where we would go tubing, which meant we would get in these giant inflatable tires and float down the river. We got there on Friday, go tubing on Saturday, and leave on Sunday. It was me, my girlfriend, her best friend, and her boyfriend. The four of us were supposed to have a great weekend together, that instead turned into a nightmare that will keep me away from the outdoors for good. I'm pretty sure I had an encounter with the Goatman. We arrived on Friday with no fuss. We set up our tents at the designated campground and made dinner. There were no other campers around us since school had started up again, so we had the area to ourselves. We drank all night, the other three drinking more than me because I'm not a fan of the hard stuff, just a few beers. It was late at night, probably around midnight, when I had to pee, so I left the campsite and walked down the path a little bit into the woods. When I found a good spot, I unzipped my pants and began to relieve myself. When I looked ahead, and faintly, in the moonlight, I could see a figure moving in between the trees. The moon was about half full, so there wasn't much light to make out the features. The leaves and sticks crunched underneath it. Just as I was finishing up this thing, started to make this weird noise. Sounded like a muffled yote, but not quite right. Like a person was imitating a goat. It kept walking around like it was looking for something, but whatever it was scared the hell out of me. So I ran back to the campsite and acted like it didn't happen. My friends were so drunk, I don't know how they would have reacted. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else, so I made breakfast. At around noon, we drove up the river about 3 miles using the camp's van service that would drop us off, and we would tube down the river back to our campsite. I had pretty much forgotten about the weird creature from the previous night until I had a weird feeling of being watched while floating down the river. It was all woods on both sides of the river, so I couldn't really confirm my feeling, but it ruined the whole experience while going down the river. It creeped the hell out of me. My friends started to feel it too when I told them. The other boyfriend claims he saw someone on the riverbank, but no one else saw it. Once we got back to camp, I told them what I saw Friday night, and it really creeped them out. That's when the boyfriend said the thing he saw kind of looked like a weirdly shaped man from a distance. We were all scared and decided that we'd leave first thing in the morning for checkout when the park rangers returned. After a while, we began drinking again and pretty much forgot about our fears for a moment and had fun again. It wasn't later until that night that my fear returned. We were all pretty drunk at this point, and we were doing that thing when you're drunk, you kind of have those heart-to-hearts with each other and talk about life. That kind of conversation, you know? We started to hear those noises again. It started off in the distance at first, but then got closer and closer to our campsite. We heard noises all around us, just twigs breaking, scratching on trees, and more of those goat noises mixed with a man growling. None of us had a weapon, so we were pretty scared and huddled close to each other. The scariest part was that the bugs stopped making noises. Eventually, we all drank some more and fell asleep around the campfire. I woke up in the middle of the night probably because I sensed something was wrong. I didn't know how to explain it, but it was like sleep paralysis or something where I couldn't move and I couldn't speak. I opened my eyes and saw this terrifying thing in between all of us. It had the body of a skinny man with a distorted face and long, unnatural arms. I saw that it was pacing back and forth between us, would stop and look at my girlfriend and arch its back and act like it was chuckling. It kept twitching its body and sniffing the air around everyone. The Goatman finally came over to me and looked me in the eyes. It had these dark, pitted eyes and its mouth was wet with drool. It got close to me and opened its mouth, making that noise into my face. The noise must have woken the boyfriend, and he started to scream, which scared the creature, and he ran off on all fours back into the woods. I was finally able to move, and I crawled over to my girlfriend and held her for the rest of the night. The first thing in the morning, we packed our stuff and checked out at the main lodge. We will never go back to those woods in Maryland again. There is something living out there, guys, and I'm telling you the story because I don't want anything to happen to you. It was 2007. I was with a couple of my friends camping. I was 16 and just with some 16 to 18-year-olds on this fun camping trip out in the woods behind some of these guys' houses. We picked a spot in the clearing where it would be like a kind of party-like site, although I don't do drugs or even smoke weed or any of that. I grew up with that going on all around me, so I tried to avoid it. But nobody brought weed or anything along, I don't think. So we all hung out in this clearing, with 3 different tents set up, and with a fire pit in the middle. We had planned to spend 4 to 5 days. It was summer vacation, so we didn't have school. I think this was early August. Anyway, we all decided to hang out in the clearing, roasting marshmallows, and everyone but me having beers. I sat around making s'mores, and the sun was just beginning to set, and we were all having a good time. At around 7 o'clock or so, we heard something moving in the bushes nearby, and someone threw an empty beer bottle at the bushes. We heard the smash, and watched something climb out of the bushes and lumber back into the trees. We thought it was just some psycho person, but everyone got a little nervous. Later that night, I was asleep in the tent with 3 other people. The only person I knew was my friend Paul, who invited me along. I remember everything being silent, and then I heard a sort of popping sound by the fire, and we all sat up. Crawling out, we could hear people in other tents' voices saying, "What was that?" Paul unzipped the tent, and we crawled out. The fire, which we had put out about an hour or 2 ago, was now roaring with flames. We put it out and thought maybe someone had poured gasoline all over the fire and lit a match, or lighter and lit the fire. But we never heard the gas pouring, or a match being struck, or a lighter being flicked. We also didn't hear anybody running away because we would have heard them. It was at this point there was an awful smell, but I had a stuffy nose and couldn't make it out really. It may have been a skunk, but Paul said one of the other guys said it was like rotten meat, but we had not smelled it earlier or since. Some other people began holding their shirts up to their noses as if a pungent smell had just appeared. We were all a little on edge, but I guess some people agreed. Screw it, let's just stay here. Nobody brought any guns to fend ourselves off, but one guy, who was about 18, said he had a pocket knife. Our second day here, nothing happened and it became night again. At around 4 a.m., we were all fast asleep and awoken by noises behind our tent. We started to get out when Paul said, Shut up for a minute." We sat in silence, listening to the noises, which sounded like voices I couldn't make out. The voices seemed to be coming closer to us, and we quietly climbed out of the tent. The voices still approaching our camp. The 2 other guys in our tent crept to the other tents and woke the other people up, telling them to get out of here at once. All 13 of us stood quietly, listening to the voices get closer and louder. At the point where they had gotten behind our tent, we heard the voices stop, but an eerie humming noise was coming from the trees all around us. One of the guys, I think named Ben, who was 17 or 18, walked to about 10 feet from the tree line where the voices had been coming from. He said, "Oi, Who was there? And we quietly waited for a response. We heard nothing except distant crickets. He walked back to us, and right then we heard the voices moving away, which to me sounded like what Ben had asked. Oi, who's there? But it didn't sound like Ben moving away, almost like something was trying to mimic what he sounded like. I could hear the voice sort of crackly and jumpy, repeating those words as it moved off into the distance. We all got back to our tents, but didn't sleep. The next day, someone had left to their house to grab something. They came back a little later with a potato gun, saying he'd shoot the crap out of the thing bothering our campsite. Around 7 p.m., not really partying, but just huddled around the fire, a girl, just one of the two, stands up, practically pissing herself, and we find out what's wrong. Here's one of the similarities I found with the well-known Goatman story. She said that last night, when we were listening to the voices, there was another person with us. There was 13 of us now, but she insisted that there had been a 14th. Reading the Anansi Goatman story and connecting that experience later made my butt clench. We all started to get nervous again, and Ben told us he was going to run back to his house. He and Potato Gun Guy were neighbors. And he said he was going to get his father to come out here with a gun and wait. Someone went with him, and Paul and I were just talking to each other about how we could leave early if everything got too chaotic, which is starting to get to now. We were in the middle of talking about how we should pack up when we saw Ben standing in the woods. It was clearly him with his blue hoodie and jeans, and he was looking straight at us from about 40 feet away, but we didn't know what he was doing. The person who went with him wasn't standing next to him. It was just him, standing alone, watching us. It was a 25-minute walk back to his house, but he couldn't have been back 5 minutes later. Everyone got really uncomfortable, and people started yelling, "Hey, Ben, what are you doing?" But he just kept watching us. We watched as he seemed to slink back into the trees. By now, people were scared out of their minds, and I was too. Why was Ben being a prick and just staring at us and not doing anything? We decided to pile into one tent and wait. A short while later, the other Ben turned up with his dad, and the other person that went with him and his dad was holding a hunting rifle. Ben told him what happened with the voices, and the father walked that way into the trees and took a look around. He said it felt like eyes were watching him from every direction. Paul then told Ben's dad that we just saw another Ben standing in the woods, staring at us. Ben's dad walked over there and looked around too. He came back and said he could stay with us and the gun, but said he would control it because if we got drunk and started shooting a gun around, we'd all kill ourselves. He slept in Ben's tent. It was our third night here, and it was really creepy. We quietly listened for it, being anywhere nearby. Paul had a funny look in his eye and started sweating. He later told me that while we were all sitting around, he saw a strange figure moving through the woods, moving its arms around in a strange jumpy motion. Around 2 a.m., we were all going to get ready for bed, and we heard it. It was saying something, but in a high-ish voice. It sounded like it was saying, "Oi, who's there?" Completely mimicking what Ben had said the night before. Ben's dad tried to pinpoint where the voice was coming from and fired a shot into the trees. The gunshot was loud. Right after, we could hear a creepy chanting like male voice. I was scared. Paul was scared. Everyone was. The chanting sounded like a deep voice chanting, so not multiple people. Underneath the chanting, we could hear something mumbling noises. Again, another shot was fired, but I saw what Ben's dad was shooting at. It was a figure crouched by some low bushes. It looked like a direct hit, but the figure did not move. Instead, it stood up, sort of hunched over, and moved back into the forest. We raced back into our tents and could hear crying and moaning coming from right behind our tent. All four of us in the tent were getting scared. And then I could kind of smell a strong vinegar smell that was very powerful. Then I noticed what looked like fingertips moving along the tent wall to the door and moved down the zipper to grab the part you used to open. Paul dove over to the zipper and held it down as whoever or whatever tried to pull it open. Paul and one other guy in the tent started yelling, "Who's out there?" And after a minute, you could hear a screeching noise as this thing took off into the darkness. We decided to say, "Screw the fourth and fifth day. Let's just get out of here in the morning." Here's the scariest experience of that night. At 3:45 a.m., I had to go pee. Since what had just occurred not long ago, I decided I wasn't getting out of the tent, and maybe I could stick my bird out of a small zipper opening, but then I pictured whatever it was out there biting or ripping my thing off, so I decided to open up the tent, slither outside, and just slightly, and pee to the side of the door. As soon as I was finished, I noticed someone by the furthest tent away. Grabbed my flashlight beside my pillow and turned it on. Shine it towards the person. Looked like Paul, back facing to me, hunched over by the tent. But Paul was right behind me, sleeping in the tent. I crawled back inside, but kept my light shined on the other Paul. I whispered, "Paul, wake up." And the moment he did, I looked outside to see the other Paul stand up, and turn, facing towards me, and stare at me. I dove back in and leapt under my sleeping bag and huddled there, awake, as I explained to Paul what I had just seen. I guess at one point in the night, I was facing another way and was freaking out, but one of the guys in the tent said he woke up, eyes still half closed as he rolled over. He could see the other Paul looking through the part in the tent flap I didn't close. He thought it was just Paul coming to wake them up, but realized the real Paul was asleep right beside him. We packed up and left. So, I guess that's the creepiest thing that happened to me. I don't exactly know where this forest was. It was on private property, but I think that was scary. I have a couple different stories I can share, but I don't think they were as scary as this.